Yes, I gotta have faith. I gotta have
You're listening to Faith at Work, brought to you by LymeRevive.org. Information and healing for Lyme disease. Now to our host, Carl Grant.
Welcome to Faith at Work. I'm Carl Grant with Pat Gelsinger, CEO of VMWare. Thanks for joining us, Pat.
Hey, great to be here, Carl, and happy to be on the show.
So, Pat, I feel funny asking you this because you're a legend in the tech industry, but for our listeners who are outside of the tech industry, will you walk us through how you got into the business and then a little bit about your career through Intel, EMC, and VMware?
Yeah, I'm a farm boy from Pennsylvania that stumbled into technology, and I sort of view it that way. All of my family was farmers, and I accidentally took a scholarship exam, skipped my last year of high school, and started to work toward being an electronics technician. Intel came recruiting, and this is 1979. I was 18 years old, and they invited me to California. And it's like a free trip to California, 18 years old, never been on an airplane, sign me up. But I had no intention of leaving Pennsylvania. You know, I'm an East Coast boy. But they made me an offer to work and go to school. And so wham, I'm living in California in the heart of Silicon Valley. Before it was the famous Silicon Valley of today, I started working at Intel, and my career just exploded. I call it the Cinderella career, Carl, where I was getting sort of promotion after promotion. I was working and going to school at the same time. So I got my bachelor's at Santa Clara, master's, PhD work at Stanford, and became literally one of the top guys at Intel. Worked on pretty much every microprocessor since the 286. So if any of the listeners have ever used a personal computer, I helped create USB and Wi-Fi. So if you've ever used USB or Wi-Fi, some of my work is represented in your daily life.
Yeah, my kids know you as the Wi-Fi guy, and, because they live, from hotspot to hotspot. So talk a little bit about your role in developing Wi-Fi.
Yeah, and I was CTO. I became the Chief Technology Officer for Intel, which has to be like one of the coolest jobs on earth, Carl, because here you are, you're, I'm overseeing, at the time, a $5-6 billion R&D budget, and we're doing some of the deepest physics things on the planet as we're doing, lower and lower lithography. We're also creating these industry standards like PCI, USB, plug and play, but also Wi-Fi. And Wi-Fi at the time was, today it's like, well, of course, there's Wi-Fi everywhere. But at the time, there was competing international standards. I made many trips to China, Europe, ITU, some of the key technology trade-offs, till it became the standard that we know and love today, and really has enabled an entire generation of products and capabilities. So, certainly sits as one of the great things on my resume.
Well, we thank you for that. So walk us through your movement over to EMC and what you did there.
Well, being at Intel for 30 years, and again, I started when I was 18. I thought I'd be there a couple of years, and voila, 30 years later. And Joe Tucci, the CEO of EMC, came calling and really convinced me that I had the opportunity for advancement, his help getting there. And I really came to a point in my career where I felt I didn't have either at Intel, the opportunity nor the help of the current CEO. And so after 30 years, which is just, you've been somewhere for 30 years, Carl, you don't know where you end and the furniture starts. I mean, you're just so embedded in that environment. So one of the hardest decisions of my life was moving to EMC, moved to Boston, so back closer to my Pennsylvania roots. And we had a delightful 3 years there. Moved from silicon to systems at EMC. And then EMC was the majority owner of VMware. And it was sort of an in-the-family move where I moved back to the West Coast to become the CEO of VMware, which I've now been for 6 years.
And just elaborate a little bit on your role there at VMware. You've done some great things.
Yeah, when I came here, the company was about $3 billion in revenue, and really had created the core, this thing called a virtual machine or hypervisor, which is the basis for every cloud. Uses this technology today. So it was really a dramatic, disruptive, innovative company, but it was starting to flatline. And really, as I came in, it was building the new vision, laying out a strategy for the future, and really putting it back on a growth trajectory. And this year will be about $9 billion in revenue. I have my group here of 25,000 almost. That's VMware. Strong growth. We've tripled the market cap of the company, and people really have seen and respected the great work that we've done.
It's been an amazing run. So you grew up in rural Pennsylvania, and I remember a little bit from your story. I heard it last year that you grew up in a Mennonite community, didn't you?
Yeah, it was, in the Pennsylvania area, as I called it, we had the Amish, the Mennonites, and the Pennsylvania Dutch. And we were Pennsylvania Dutch. So we were the liberals in comparison, which is super conservative for the rest of the nation. But compared to the Amish or Mennonites, we were pretty liberal. But, it was a very traditional environment, and born and raised in the church. I was baptized with full knowledge of what I was doing when I was 6 days old. And, really always thought of myself as a Christian. Why? Because I was in church since I was 6 days old. But as I would describe it, I was good on Sundays because I wanted to impress the mothers and grandmothers of the girls I liked, and was pretty rotten the other 6.5 days a week. And actually came to Christ when I moved to the Bay Area, met my wife to be, and Revelation 3:15 and 16. I know your deeds, that you are neither hot nor cold. I wish you were one or the other. And that became the verse that really brought me to that point of personal crisis, and accepted Christ as a 18-year-old in California, and have been on a journey ever since then of how to be hot for him.
So, and how did that come about? Was it your wife that played a role in that? Were you at church, or how did you come to that decision point?
Yeah, somewhat all of the above. So here I am. I'm in this radically different place, and I think sometimes, somewhat like Jesus says when he goes and visits Nazareth. A prophet isn't respected in his own home, and I think getting out of that comfortable Pennsylvania environment was part of it. Being in California, where all these radically different things are going on. Meeting Linda, and she sort of immediately challenged me on what my faith perspective was, the Christian church community I was in, and all of those sort of culminated with me accepting Christ in February of 1980. And almost immediately, God started to put, his scarlet thread into my life. My roommate to be, God spoke to him and said we were supposed to be roommates, and I'm like, God's talking to you about me. It was one of these wow, and very quickly I felt the call of God to go into ministry. And I'm like, I don't want to be a minister, God. I love this computer stuff and what I'm doing here. And, as that progressed, what came out of it, Carl, was that, I finally laid a fleece before God after a couple of months of arguing with him, and said, like Gideon, if this happens, I will go into ministry. And as soon as I gave up, the answer was the workplace is your ministry. And that's been my focus ever since. How can I use the platforms that God has given me in the workplace to be a full-time minister for him? And as I describe it, if you're a Christian, you're a full-time minister. Just a few vocationally, the rest of us occupationally. And in our occupations, how can we be full-time ministers in the home place, in the marketplace, in the school place, and most importantly, in the workplace?
So let's elaborate a little bit on how you do that practically. I mean, you have ways of putting your faith into action like I've seen nobody else do. You climb mountains and you get your employees involved, and what is that all about?
Well, a handful of thoughts there, and this is something that requires wisdom, and as Christ says that you would be as wise as serpents and as gentle as doves, and I think you do have to be very thoughtful about it. But some of the ways that I say, certainly as a CEO, the values of the company right? We talk a lot about, our philanthropy efforts, the integrity of the company, are focused on customers and communities. And wow, it's like a sermon without scriptural text. It's, really is deeply empowering. I role model it, as you said. I climbed Kilimanjaro this summer as a fundraiser for some slum work that we've supported for many years. I grabbed other VMware guys to join me, and we're building a girls' high school for some of the girls that are, being pulled out of that very extreme poverty environment there. So, people are going, wow, this is good stuff. They see the company in this regard as not just doing well, but also doing good. And that's one of the mottos that we've taken, that we're going to be a company that, makes tech a force for good. And we talk about it all the time as a company. Personally as well, it's important as the CEO, and I think for anybody in a secular environment, the more that you are engaging on others people's faiths, the more that you can talk about your faith. And that could be a Buddhist, it could be a Hindu, it could be an Islam, it could be Catholic. Be inquisitive about their faith. What is it? What is this Diwali thing anyway? And how do you celebrate? Well, let me tell you about how I celebrate, and all of these different aspects. And the other thing that I always encourage Christians as well is your most powerful witnessing tool is this simple phrase: "May I pray for you?" And in times of need, people never turn down prayers for their needs. And I've said this thousands of times to people, hundreds of times to people who I know are atheists or agnostics, and no one has ever said, no, you can't pray for my need. And then, a couple of weeks later, you come back and you ask, well, how is Aunt Mary doing? And, how is your daughter? Or, whatever that situation might be. And it is deeply engaging that you are, engaging not just as a business leader, not just as a business manager or CEO in my role, but you're engaging in their lives. And as you do that, you empower people to bring their whole selves into the workplace. And that's such a powerful concept that no diversity or inclusion or any of these things becomes preventing of what that might be.
And do you also pray for your company? And have you seen prayers answered?
Oh yeah, in marvelous ways. And it's like, do you think the God of the universe doesn't know when you have a business problem, right? Of course he does, right? And then as you're praying for that, you are praying, for success. If I don't make this company successful, I can't employ 25,000 people. I cannot fund the families of 25,000 people. I cannot be improving the communities of 25,000 people. Yeah, I'm passionate about making this company successful. But as we would say, it's always putting that there's a higher purpose in what we do. We're out to make our customers successful. We're about to improve our communities, to enable people to give to the charities and the causes that are important to them. And certainly, my own, personal prayers, often it's somewhat hard to separate company success from God's will. And in reality, that's how life is. It often is pretty hard to separate those two. So, take your needs and requests to God, and don't be afraid of it.
Pat Gelsinger, CEO of VMware, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Carl Grant with Faith at Work. Please visit us at www.facebook.com/faithatworkradio.
Yes, I gotta have faith. I gotta have
You have been listening to Faith at Work with Carl Grant, brought to you by limerevive.org.